Welcome back to part 2 of my passivity and indecision video. If you haven't seen the first part, you might want to. I'm going to put that in the link up here. So in this one, I'm going to talk more about the consequences of the disconnection that was created within myself and that evolved out of a fairly oppressive and controlling home environment, and real feelings of isolation and essentially a real lack of emotional support from family. I felt as if I'd grown up in a situation where I was really abandoned emotionally. I was really left to fend for myself, to figure the world out for myself. And lots of people are. If you've experienced, a particularly dysfunctional home environment, or you've experienced trauma, and you have those well-honed fight or flight reflexes, those sort of well-honed introvert, get me out of here, I'm just gonna sink into the furniture instincts in you that you build up through a lonely childhood or a sort of overwhelming childhood. I talked a lot in the first video about sort of retreating into myself, and that created this disconnection between the inner me and the physical me that was walking around, going through life, going through the world. And the physical me was just very passively shrugging and just going along with things, going on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But I didn't feel engaged. I didn't feel in my body, and therefore I didn't feel in the decisions I was making. I didn't feel in the life I was living. Over time, I became a university teacher, and really my path to becoming a university teacher was the result of passivity and indecision. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life, or even who I was, or even what decisions or options were available to me upon leaving school. University was suggested to me. It seemed that that was what you had to do after you finished school. I didn't have a core good group of friends that, I was really in step with, in sync with, who I was making decisions with, who I felt as if, I was going to go traveling with, or, move out of home with and start renting somewhere with. So, it felt like I had to go to university, which I did. And I never really figured anything out while I was there. I got to the end of my BA and decided to add on an honours year. I got to the end of my honours year and decided to go on with a PhD, really just treading water, feeling as if, well, this is really all I know. And even though it was really all I knew, I didn't even know it particularly well. Why was I at university? Was I interested in pursuing an academic career? Did I want to do a PhD? Did I want to continue? I couldn't have told you. In the same way that when I left school, what did I want to do? Who was I? I didn't have those answers either. So it really just became a process of continuing to tread water, and that's really what my time at university was. Funnily enough, I was supervising a student who was doing I think they were doing their master's. Anyway, it doesn't matter, but I had an encounter with a student that I found really funny, because I asked them what they wanted to do with their life. And they told me completely seriously that what they wanted was to do what I was doing. And they believed that having my life, or a life like mine, would be great. They sort of idolized how I was living. And I was absolutely shocked by this. I was completely taken aback. Like, what do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? What do you think my life is like? And they described it to me. And they described it accurately. They said, well, you're writing, you're teaching, you're doing this, doing that. And, I think that would be so cool. That would be really fun. And it struck me that I had manifested something that somebody else found not enviable necessarily, but just something that someone else found good, because I didn't. And really what I want to say in this video to some extent is that my disconnection really cut me off from gratitude, because I was so inside myself, not really certain of what I was doing or why I was doing it. Because I wasn't in those decisions in my life, I wasn't experiencing it for what it was either. I didn't value it. And I regret that. I regret it on two levels. I regret not figuring out what I wanted to be doing, but then I regret being somebody who wasn't grateful, because practicing gratitude is essential for our mental health. Like, it's core to feeling positive and feeling good in the world, is to practice some gratitude for what you have. I had no gratitude because I had no sense of what I had, because again, I was removed from the life I was living internally. Now, a lot of this, I would come to find later, had much to do with, various diagnoses that I was ascribed. But rather than talk about this from necessarily a mental health specific perspective, I'm more interested to talk about this from the perspective of the effect that upbringing can have on us, and what a retreat into the self, or a disconnection from self, can have on us. So later in life, when people would tell me that I was lucky, or that I had something great, or that they admired something I'd done, or what have you, I had no sense of what they were saying, because I actually didn't value any of the things that I had in my life. I put no value in what I was doing, because I hadn't been consciously choosing what I was doing. I was really acting out of avoidance. I don't know what to do, so I guess I'll do that, and I'll go along, and I'll go along, and I'll go along. And that included a long-term relationship, which after the first 6 months, I sensed I didn't want to be in. That relationship went on for 9 years. That is how passive, how indecisive, how disconnected, and how avoidant I was as a person, that I could just endure my life, because that is what I'd been conditioned to do. You just sort of shrug, you endure it, you suppress how you really feel, and you sort of switch your mind off. You don't go after the things you want. You don't bother finding out what it is you really want. And, you avoid yourself in that process. Again, I have a terrible amount of regret and guilt for really wasting my 20s so thoroughly with a total lack of gratitude and through total passivity. It's hard as a man to admit feeling that you have no agency. It's also hard coming to terms with how passive you can be. I talk about that in the first video where I said that, masculinity itself is sort of founded on being decisive, taking action, all that sort of stuff. And when you're not that sort of a person, or you're conditioned not to be that sort of a person, or you've not had those things modeled to you, it's a very, you experience a lot of shame, and I still now experience a lot of shame around this stuff. What's ironic now is that, if you were to sit me down and say, what do you want to do most? I would love to go to university. I would love to go and study and, do what I did in my 20s. I'd like to do those things again. I think that would be wonderful. And in so many ways, this video is really also about timing, that I wasn't ready to do the things that I did because I hadn't sorted myself out yet. I hadn't worked out my past, the effect that it had on me, the effect my family had on me, how to overcome it, to put in the years of work, years and years of therapy, and then getting a diagnosis and medication. I hadn't gone down those pathways yet. And I always got the sense at 18, 19, 20, 21, and all through my 20s that life was this thing that happened to you. It wasn't something that you put yourself onto life, that you shaped the course. I mean, look, free will and choice, yes, we have those things, but they're limited to certain extents based on, conditions and cultures and environments we're born into, right? But we can make decisions. We just can't, probably make as many decisions as we'd like to think we can. If you want to experience something like agency, you really have to do the work of getting to know yourself first. And I didn't. And life started to take off. Life started to happen to me. And before I knew it, I had kind of gotten into a life that I didn't understand because I hadn't really chosen it, and that I didn't value for that reason, but that I didn't value as much as I should have. And the sad and ironic thing is that, as I say, if you were to ask me now, much like my student many, many years ago, I look back and think, oh, that would be really nice. That would actually be kind of cool. Probably not seeing the way that academia and the tertiary education system has gone. It's pretty much a complete and utter shit show. But because I wasn't present in my life, not only was I ungrateful for what I had, but I was also not able to take full advantage of what I had. And much like it's rather ironic that, I sit here now and go, gee, that would be nice. Doing all those things I did 15 years ago. The irony is also that quite recently I was searching for opportunities for myself. And I came across this wonderful, what was it? It was I can't remember exactly. It was a scholarship or it was a exchange program, something like that. Because I'm really interested in traveling and all those things now. And I couldn't believe it. I started looking through the, the criteria for eligibility. And I realized that this program had been available to me all along, all throughout the time that I'm talking about now. The time throughout my 20s when I was not present at all. And that, again, ironically, frustratingly, I was now not eligible. But I was eligible and had been eligible that whole time. And the window had passed. It had come and gone. And I'm only a relatively young person now. I'm only 36. But it was this kind of really stark moment where I was like, wow, if I'd understood what I was doing at the time I was doing it, if I'd really thought about myself, if I'd gotten to a point in my life where I understood what I wanted, if I'd created desire, if I'd connected to my feelings, if I'd connected to myself, I had things that I could have taken advantage of. And the time's passed, the moment's gone. I'm not eligible anymore for those things. And as I say, I think that this video is also partly about timing. I really got off on the fact that I was doing things young. Like, I think to counter out what I knew in myself to be my passivity and my indecisiveness, I generated a kind of a bravado around being young and doing things kind of doing difficult things at a young age. So like my background is I started teaching at university at 24 years of age, and I graduated with a PhD at 27, and I had published several books by the age of 30. And that's impressive from an achievement and accomplishment perspective. However, it's not impressive from a life perspective. No, how do I mean this? It's impressive as a like a trick, but I don't think that it's beneficial. I don't think it's beneficial to have things so young, really, overall. But I would sort of use my youth as kind of a way to bolster my ego. I'd be like, I'm the youngest person in the room. I'm the youngest person doing this. I'm a doctor at 27, doctor of philosophy, but like it would kind of like pump my ego up, and I could kind of get into it that way. But that didn't really do that much for me. It was sort of my only way of kind of finding meaning in my life, was to be like, I'm doing everything young. Like, I'm doing everything well ahead of when most people do these things. That gave me a sense of purpose, and it gave me a sense of drive. But it was it was a drive that was all ego and with quite a lot of anger in it as well. Like, I was really determined to sort of conquer everything before anyone else. And once I started getting a little older and sort of my age was catching up to at least some of the younger people around me in my field, I kind of felt like I'd lost the magic, you know, like, oh, I'm just like everybody else now. So it was very fleeting, and it's not a reason to do anything. We have an obsession with age, and we kind of privilege and love when young people do things, when they achieve. But that was something that's something that culturally I have a big problem with. And, you know, that was also something I was kind of conditioned to respond to, because as an only child, you know, I was always the little boy, the little grandson, the child in all the family dynamics. And so much of how I got attention was based on accomplishment and achievement. You know, I was always the successful child. So I would show up at my paternal grandparents' house with the violin I was learning, and I would play a little concert for them. And, you know, I always got A's at school and all that sort of stuff. I was an overachiever, and I was a golden child. And so really that just continued. And in my 20s, I didn't recognize that. I didn't see that connection. But looking back now, it's like, well, you just played at being golden boy through till about 30, and then realized I have no idea who I am. I have no real purpose. I'm miserable beyond belief. And, you know, for me, it culminated in several suicide attempts, and just being so disconnected from myself that despite everything I'd achieved, and you know, I wasn't grateful for any of it. I had no relationship to it because I didn't feel like I'd chosen any of it, and so on and so forth. So that passivity, that kind of going along with it, playing my role, it didn't result in anything at all. I needed to cultivate a relationship with myself. So to finish up, you know, in part, my passivity and my indecision and my disconnection from myself was because I was overwhelmed by life. I didn't understand my life. I had experienced an unusual family dynamic, but I had experienced a particularly unusual and trying and even traumatic emotional relationship, emotional culture between myself and the people who were supposed to help me understand life and guide me through it. My parents, my family. And being really overwhelmed continued. And it was being overwhelmed that ultimately I should really say that that's what I was. I wasn't really passive or indecisive so much as overwhelmed. I didn't know how. And because I was functional and academically and intellectually, you know, I was just sort of funneled into a life that I didn't understand. I could do it. I could do the things that I did, but I didn't understand my why. I didn't understand my reason for doing those things, and I didn't have the tools. I wasn't equipped to really thrive. Like I say, I could accomplish things. almost like a trick, like, hey, look at me, I'm this young person that can do all these things. But I wasn't really equipped with the self-knowledge to take those accomplishments and achievements, to take the abilities I did have and make a life, because I was overwhelmed by life. And that happened in all, my inability to make a life happened in every aspect of my life, domestically, romantically, in my career. And, I really did just shut down by, about the time I turned 30, I just started shutting down. I'd just gotten so overwhelmed, and my achievements really concealed how poorly I was doing in myself, including to me. I tricked myself. Ultimately, I had too much baggage and too many problems needing addressing, and I needed to form a relationship with myself before I could do anything else. And that's why I started this channel, because that's what I'm attempting to do, is to find myself and to find an authentic self and an authentic relationship to and with that self. So thanks for watching. There'll be another one of these videos next Friday. And if you get the chance, it'd be great if you subscribe to the channel. There's further links in the description field below. And don't forget to listen to the podcast I am in the process of making with my mum, which is about the memoir we're writing together, which is about all of this stuff, all our mental health and family baggage, and our process of forming a relationship with one another and trying to get to the bottom of what happened. That's called the Barrow Podcast. And again, just check the description field below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you again soon, hopefully. Bye.